One of these assassins burned his own village to the ground before he ever picked up a blade, yet the official records rank him near the bottom of the deadliest killers in the franchise. That grief should make him the most violent name on the list, but the kill count only tracks named targets, not the battlefields he waded through. So if the numbers can hide the deadliest fighter this easily, what are they hiding about everyone else? Connor Kenway. The best fighter in Assassin's Creed history has one of the worst kill counts on record, and that is not an accident, it's a warning about every number this whole ranking is about to throw at you. 15. That's it. 15 confirmed canonical assassinations for a man who spends entire missions turning redcoat platoons into casualty reports. Franchise breakdowns keep landing on the same verdict, that Connor is arguably the single most capable fighter the series has ever produced, and then his official tally shows up looking like a rounding error next to the legends around him. The contradiction gets worse the closer you look. At Bunker Hill, Connor cuts through scores of soldiers in open combat, tomahawk work so brutal it defines how people remember the entire Revolutionary War arc of this franchise. None of it counts. Not one of those redcoats makes it onto his assassination ledger, because the game only tracks named Templar targets, not the pile of bodies he leaves behind defending a hill nobody's even paying him to hold. That's the pattern with Connor. He's not out here hunting a rotating cast of Templar names for sport. His missions center on protecting his village, protecting allies, protecting a mother he loses to fire, and a homeland he watches get carved up by two sides that both see him as a means to an end. He fights because people he loves keep needing saving, not because there's a target list demanding blood. Defensive killing doesn't get counted the same way offensive killing does, even when the body count is identical. So the very first name on this list already breaks the ranking system before it even gets going. If the most lethal combatant in the franchise sits near the bottom of the confirmed kills, then the number everyone's about to argue over was never measuring deadliness in the first place. But at least this one's low number came with a legend attached. What about the killer whose deadliness lives entirely in who he stalked? A man with no official tally at all because the game refused to count a ghost's work? Basim ibn Ishaq. Basim ibn Ishaq has killed more people than almost anyone on this list, and the games refuse to tell you that. Every other assassin gets a tally somewhere. Basim gets silence, not because he did not earn one, but because the story he is in cares about who he killed, not how many. Mirage does not hand you a scoreboard for Basim the way later entries do for other protagonists. There is no counter ticking upward as you clear district after district. What you get instead is a short, specific list of Order of the Ancients leadership in Baghdad, each one hunted through infiltration, patience, and a blade that only needs to land once. His whole kit reinforces that. Chain assassinations that clear a room in seconds, single-strike takedowns that leave zero witnesses, tools built for silence rather than spectacle. This is not a man built for the battlefield Connor thrived on. This is a man built to make sure a target never even knows they were the target. The order dies quietly around Basim, one senior figure at a time, and that restraint is the entire point of who he is. But treat Mirage as the whole story, and you are only reading the cover page. Basim is Loki, reincarnated and running centuries ahead of everyone else in the timeline, still alive and still maneuvering. By the time Valhalla rolls around, using Isu technology no other protagonist has access to, a being like that does not stop killing just because the credits rolled on his one documented outing. Nothing in canon hands you a lifetime number, but follow what the lore actually sets up. Centuries of survival, godlike patience, and motive to keep removing threats long after Baghdad. That math almost certainly extends far past anything Mirage shows on screen. His real weapon was never the blade count. It was the scheme that outlived every person who thought they understood him. A manipulation so patient it makes a body count feel like the wrong question entirely. Immortality and no number is one kind of unmeasurable, but there is a different kind of dangerous. A killer whose small pile of bodies mattered more than most massacres because of exactly whose necks he opened. Arnaud Dorian. 34 kills. That is the entire canonical body count for a man who spent his story murdering the people running the French Revolution from the shadows. 34 sounds small next to the numbers this list keeps throwing around. It is not small once you look at who those 34 people actually were. Arnaud's targets were not random guards or nameless soldiers standing in a crowd somewhere. They were grand masters, high-ranking Templars pulling strings behind the most explosive political event in modern European history. Kill a foot soldier and the war continues without him. Business as usual, nobody even notices. Kill the man secretly steering the entire revolution's direction, and history itself bends a little. Unity practically begs you to avoid a body count in the first place. The whole game is built around blending into crowds, ducking into alleys, letting 100 oblivious guards walk right past you while you slip a blade into the one man who actually matters. Arno could have racked up thousands of incidental kills the way other assassins buried entire garrisons without blinking. Instead, his cannon tally reads like a list of precise assassination contracts, not a massacre. And every single one of those 34 kills traces back to a wound that never closed. His adoptive father murdered in front of him as a child. His love for Elise, a woman standing on the opposite side of a war he could never actually win, no matter what he tried. Arno does not kill out of ambition. He kills because grief gave him nowhere else to put his hands. That is what makes him dangerous in a way a simple kill count cannot show. Basim proved that influence outweighs volume. Arno proves it with receipts. 34 names that each detonated inside the most volatile moment in modern history. Small tally, massive shockwave. But killing the right people still means you know exactly who your enemy is. What happens when the blade stops recognizing sides at all, when the people falling to it are not conspirators or tyrants, but the very brothers who raised you into this life in the first place? Shay Cormac. Shay Cormac has the shortest kill list of any major assassin protagonist, and it might also be the deadliest thing anyone in this ranking ever did. The other names on this list killed for the Brotherhood. Shay killed the Brotherhood. That is not a metaphor. Shay starts as an assassin, watches his own order chase a piece of first civilization tech that ends up leveling Lisbon, and decides the people giving the orders are the real threat. So he switches sides and starts hunting his former brothers and sisters one by one. His targets are not colonial officials or corrupt merchants. They are assassin bureau leaders, veteran operatives, people who trained recruits and ran networks across 2 continents. The numbers here are almost embarrassing next to that fact. Rogue never hands you a tally screen. There's no combat log totaling up how many people Shay put in the ground. What compiled lists do show is a small roster, maybe a dozen or so named eliminations. Almost all of them senior assassins rather than nameless guards. Compare that to Arno tearing through corrupt nobility to fix a broken system from the inside. Shay is doing the opposite. He is not protecting the Brotherhood's reputation. He is dismantling its leadership structure, region by region, until entire cells stop functioning. Then there is Lisbon. Shay's actions help trigger a disaster that kills an almost incomprehensible number of people, and not one of those deaths shows up on his personal kill count. 0 credit, 0 blame, just a city turned to rubble and a body count that nobody bothers to attach to him. So which version of Shay is the accurate one? The guy with maybe a dozen confirmed targets, or the guy indirectly connected to one of the deadliest disasters in the whole series? Both. And that is exactly the problem with using a number to measure him. Every elite assassin Shay removes is a hole in the Brotherhood's bench for years afterward. No fresh recruit replaces that kind of experience overnight. He watched his own people's arrogance get innocents killed, and his answer was to make sure those specific people never got the chance to make that mistake again. That is not a soldier racking up kills. That is a man surgically removing the Brotherhood's future, one veteran at a time. Betrayal makes a small number lethal. But now flip the entire frame. What happens when a hero's official kill count is so laughably small that fans call it the single most dishonest statistic in the whole franchise? Edward Kenway. 26 kills. That's the official number for Edward Kenway, and it might be the single most dishonest statistic in the entire franchise. The count only tracks named assassination targets and major story victims, the same narrow lens every previous entry got measured by. Nobody adjusted the formula for the guy who spends the entire game at sea. Edward is a pirate captain commanding a warship through the Caribbean for the better part of a decade, and that one distinction breaks the math completely. Between boarding enemy ships, sinking armadas, and clearing out fort garrisons manned by dozens of soldiers each, the realistic body count stacks up fast. Players have documented entire fleets sunk in single play sessions, forts stormed and emptied of every last defender, convoys wiped out for loot that barely covers the cannonballs spent doing it. Run that math across a full campaign, and Edward's actual kill total likely clears 10,000 enemies without exaggeration. 10,000 against 26. That is not a rounding error. That is a different person entirely wearing the same coat. His kit makes the number believable instead of absurd. Dual flintlock pistols for the opening volley, a cutlass for the close quarters grind, a hidden blade for anyone who gets too close undetected, and enough explosives strapped to his belt to turn a gun deck into a crater. He is built for mass casualty events, not quiet eliminations, and the game hands him that role constantly, mission after mission, ship after ship. Strip away the ledger of named victims, and what's left is a man who set out chasing gold and ended up drowning in corpses to get it. Every ship he sinks, every fort he levels, was never about ideology. It was about money, and the fortune he wanted kept costing him people he actually loved, one after another, until there was nobody left to spend it on. Connor's tally hinted the official count was quietly incomplete. Edward proves it can be incomplete by a factor of 400, and once the gap is that wide, the whole ranking system built on confirmed numbers stops looking like measurement and starts looking like a rumor everyone agreed to believe without checking the math. If uncounted slaughter is the real measure, then the counted killers are about to look almost quaint by comparison until you meet the ones whose official tallies are already so high the numbers stop being an excuse and start being the whole terrifying point. Ivor. There is no number for Ivor, not 26, not 94, not anything. Just years of rating written as pure body count with the tally torn out of the record. That absence should feel familiar by now. England did not hand the Raven clan a spreadsheet either. The Viking version of the same blind spot looks different on the ground than it did at sea. Edward's kills piled up in cannon fire and boarding actions, chaos with a hull around it. Eivors pile up one axe swing at a time, standing in a shield wall while a village burns behind them. Mercia falls stronghold by stronghold. Wessex bleeds the same way. Every assault realistically costs dozens of soldiers, guards, and desperate conscripts who picked the wrong day to stand at a gate. Eivor fights with dual axes and blunt heavy weapons built for exactly one purpose, and chains executions fast enough that a single skirmish can end with a small graveyard. This is not stealth work. This is not one target and a clean exit. This is a war machine identity, the kind of protagonist built to walk into a fortress and walk out as the only one still standing. The named kills matter too. Kings and warlords across two countries, key figures inside a hidden order threading through the whole story. Each one a person, somebody grieved. Somewhere behind every crown Eivor topples is a household that just lost its reason to keep going, the same wound every assassin on this list carries into battle, just wearing different armor, stack years of that lifestyle together. And the honest estimate rivals the pirate captain, maybe beats him, except nobody ever ran the math, because raiding was never framed as a job, with a receipt attached. It was culture. It was Tuesday. Two war machines now sit in a ranking that claims to measure kills and cannot honestly place either one. So maybe the fair fight only happens between the killers the games actually bothered to count. And the least deadly name on that shorter list still brought down some of the most powerful men of his entire era. Bayek of Siwa, a dozen kills, and most of them are a king, a priest, a general, or a governor. 0 grunts padding the number. That is not how any other tally on this list works. The Order of the Ancients did not hide behind mercenaries in Egypt. They ran the country. Bayek's targets held real titles inside the Ptolemaic regime, men and women with soldiers, temples, and treasuries under their command. Wiping out that entire roster should be the single most impressive resume in this entire ranking. He earns it too. Bayek snipes from 300 feet with a hunter bow, then closes the gap and finishes a target with a hidden blade to the throat, then vanishes into a crowd before the body hits the sand. Desert ambushes, city rooftops, military forts crawling with guards. He does all of it, and he does it as one man building a movement from nothing. But the number was never really the point for him. His son Camus died in his arms, killed when Flavius forced Bayek's blade off course during the struggle to protect a relic, and that single accident is the entire engine behind every name on his list. Bayek didn't just lose his son to the Order, his own weapon was the one that took him. Every conspirator he tracks down is a piece of the group that put that dagger in his hand in the first place. This is not a job. It is a father converting guilt into a checklist and finishing it one throat at a time, which makes his ranking sting even more. The last two names on this list proved the count itself is broken, blind to raids, blind to war, blind to bodies that never got a tally mark. Bayek is the opposite problem. His targets are real, verified, and elite, and it still is not enough to put him near the top. A dozen of the most powerful men in Egypt, and it earns him a middle seat, because there's a killer whose career spanned 40 years and 4 separate reigns of terror, whose tally makes Bayek's look like a warm-up. Hundreds of confirmed kills sounds like a legacy. It is actually a receipt for a life that got hijacked before it even started. Everyone's gut pick for Deadliest Assassin is Ezio, not because the number proves it, because he's the one fans grew up with, watched age from a hot-headed kid into the old man closing the codex for good. That's not a knock. It's just not evidence. The surface case looks strong, genuinely strong. Ezio racks up kills across Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood Revelations, and his DS spin-off, building one of the largest documented tallies in the entire franchise. His targets aren't random street thugs either. Templar grandmasters, corrupt Venetian nobility, church officials hiding behind the Pope himself, all of it spread across Florence, Venice, Rome, and Constantinople. He fights with a sword, a hidden blade, a crossbow, poison, and a crowd of hired thieves and courtesans doing the dirty work he doesn't have time for personally. Every tool in the assassin's arsenal gets used, because he's the one carrying the story that defines what that arsenal even is. But watch what happens the second you divide instead of add. Ezio's total, stacked up across 4 separate games and roughly 40 years of in-game time, is not the same achievement as a smaller number packed tight into one campaign. This is the same trap that quietly cracked open the moment target quality started outranking raw tally. Ezio's total isn't a measure of how hard he kills. It's a measure of how long Ubisoft kept writing him. Strip away the nostalgia and the math gets uncomfortable fast. A boy watches his father and brothers hanged in a public square, and that single wound funds an entire trilogy of vengeance. 40 years of grief, spread thin across 4 release cycles, dressed up as a body count, and sold back to you as destiny. Ezio isn't the deadliest, he's the most franchised. So the massive tally is really just the most games in disguise, stretched over decades to look like dominance, which sets up the ultimate test. What happens when a single game is built from the ground up to spawn more countable targets than any other, and hands its hero a number nobody else on this list can touch? Cassandra. 94. Confirmed kills. That is the number, and by every official tally, it makes Cassandra the deadliest protagonist in Assassin's Creed history. It should feel like a victory lap. It does not. The number itself is not even complete. 94 only counts individually tracked targets, named members of the Cult of Cosmos, story bosses, side quest marks. It excludes every mercenary she puts down for a bounty, every soldier she cuts through clearing a fort, every bandit who picked the wrong road on the wrong night. Analysts openly call 94 the conservative estimate, a floor and not a ceiling. And Cassandra, unlike a Renaissance nobleman working inside a 40-year window, can canonically live for centuries. Her real total is not just higher than Ezio's. It is potentially unmeasurable, a body count with no final page. So why does the crown feel hollow the second you look at where it came from? Odyssey is not a story with a body count. It is an RPG built out of body count. Cultists hiding behind fake identities, mercenary rosters that refill the second you kill the top name, bounty boards, ship battles, story arcs stacked across a main campaign and 2 full DLC epics. Every one of those systems exists for one reason: to manufacture a countable target. Ezio racked up 68 kills clawing through 40 years and 4 games, 1 Templar at a time, 1 city at a time, Florence to Venice to Rome to Constantinople. Cassandra racked up 94 inside a single game because that game was engineered to hand her targets the way a vending machine hands out cans, mechanically, endlessly on command. That is the trap. The record does not measure who killed hardest. It measures who was handed the most named people to kill. Stack a longer career against a denser game, and the denser game wins every time. Not because the woman holding the blade is deadlier, but because the blueprint behind her put more bodies with name tags directly in her path. Underneath the tally is still a person, a Misthios exiled as a child, thrown off a cliff by her own father, who spent a lifetime turning that wound into other people's funerals. The number was never big enough to hold that, which means the leaderboard everyone has been trusting up to this point was never actually ranking killers. It was ranking games, and if the title goes to whoever's story counted the most corpses, then it was never going to land on the person who actually decided what counts as a kill in the first place, the one whose fingerprints are on every blade, every other name on this list ever swung. Altair Ibn Layahad, 31 kills. That is the entire confirmed tally for the man who reformed and led this whole brotherhood. And on a list where Cassandra just posted 9431 looks like a rounding error, except the number is lying to you. The same way Cassandra's number was lying to you 2 minutes ago. Her 94 was a receipt for a bigger game with more targets to track. His 31 is a receipt for something else entirely: precision. Altair's body count comes almost entirely from one campaign, 9 Templar targets across the Holy Land, men like Robert de Sablé, each one a kingmaker or a power broker whose death rewrote the politics of an entire region. He did not farm mercenaries. He did not grind out cultists in a checklist. He earned a demotion for killing too loud and too proud early on, then spent the rest of his life relearning the creed, choosing targets by weight instead of volume. And that choice is the whole point. Every assassin ranked above him on this list, every hidden blade that found a throat, every hidden gun that dropped a target from range runs through a design he refined. He is the one who re-engineered the hidden blade into the folded, retractable version that lets an assassin kill and keep walking, work that also laid the groundwork for a dual blade design. He is the one credited with the gun tucked into the gauntlet. Cassandra's 94, Ezio's 68. Every one of those kills used his engineering to land. A father hanged, a brotherhood betrayed, a creed broken and rebuilt from nothing. That is the wound Altair carried, and out of it he didn't just raise a body count. He raised the ceiling for what a body count could even become. The deadliest assassin was never the one with the biggest number. It was the one whose blade killed through every hand that came after him. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.